YouTube. So welcome to another Mr. Chasing Rainbows video. Today's video we're going to be talking about how to vote in South Africa. Also going to talk you through the various political parties, just a few of the major ones registering to vote. This weekend coming up, the 8th and the 9th of February, is the final voting registration weekend. All the voting centres will be open for you to go and register to vote. You will need your valid South African ID with you. You need to be 16 years or over, although you have to be 18 on or before the day of actual voting, which as of yet has not been announced by the President. Also have to register before the President announces the voting, which can happen anytime after the 9th of Feb. 5 minutes out of your day to go register to vote. It's literally how long it takes, like depending on how close the centre is to you. Mine is just down the road. They're really efficient. If you cannot manage to get to the voting registration weekend, then you can register at any municipal centre during office hours. Each centre will have its own office hours, so you can just Google that or find out on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. You can also go on the Independent Electoral Commission's website to find out all the details. If you're a South African who is living abroad, or you will be abroad during the time of registration, you can register to vote overseas at an embassy or a consulate or a high commission. These are the places. Again, you have to just find out the office hours of the embassy or whatever it is that's nearest to you. The South African overseas, and you're going to register to vote there, you also need to make sure that you have your ID with you and also a valid South African passport. Once the President has announced the day of the actual elections, you have to then go online and fill in a form notifying them of your intent to vote overseas, and then on the day you will vote at your nearest embassy or consulate. So that's how that works. Have any special voting needs, or if you really won't be able to manage to vote on the actual voting day, then you can check the IEC website, and they have all the procedures for special voting. This especially applies for people with disabilities or women who are heavily pregnant and things like that, so go check it out. So now I'm going to talk to you about the ANC, which is South Africa's current leading political party. They were founded back in the day, over 100 years ago. One of the people who founded the ANC was John Dube, and then there's also Saul Plaatje and Pixley Seme. Nelson Mandela was one of the founders of the ANC Youth League and is its most prolific leader so far, from 1994 to now, which is 20 years, just about. So it's just about 20 years. The ANC have been in power. Nelson Mandela was president for the first term, then Mbeki served 2 terms, and now Zuma has served 1 term and is standing as president for a 2nd term. In South Africa, you can be president for 2 terms and then you have to step down. Right, 2 consecutive terms. Or no, not even consecutive. The biggest goals that they have are job creation, general economic development. They want to improve the national health insurance plan. They also have plans to build more hospitals and more universities, should they be re-elected. They also are very big on building housing and just improving rural life and that sort of thing. They have done quite a bit in terms of infrastructure and job creation. However, there are many people who feel that the ANC have not done enough for job creation. They certainly haven't lived up to all their promises in terms of numbers. So they promised job creation, they created jobs, not as many as they promised. They promised houses, they delivered houses, not as many as they promised. Also, a lot of people feel that Jacob Zuma is not the best choice for the presidential candidate of the ANC. There is a faction within the ANC that don't think that Zuma should be president. They also have quite a history of corruption. The ANC, when they were last voted into power, they were voted in with a 65-point-something% majority. A 66% majority allows them to change the constitution. Recently, there has been some controversy because President Zuma allegedly made comments that implied that he was wanting to change the democracy, and not in ways that would necessarily improve democracy rather to the detriment of our democracy. For example, making it so that an acting president could not be arrested. There are controversies around the Protection of State Information Bill, which would allow the president to keep certain information private, which would then restrict on the freedom of press, which is a huge part of a democracy. In light of South Africa's history, it is so important to protect our democracy and to protect the things within our democracy that can keep it in check, such as freedom of press, the ability to monitor the government, to make sure that the government acts, things like the Scorpions who used to police the government. These things are so important to protect the democracy that we worked so hard, not me personally because I wasn't born, but that people worked so hard to achieve. The next party that I'm going to talk about is a very interesting party and it is a Gang, SA. It is currently headed by Mamphela Ramphele. Gang was launched in June 2013. There is a bit of confusion about what role Mamphela Ramphele aims to take in the future of South African politics. Gang essentially is a party that wants to actualize the original goals of the ANC. So their plan is to create jobs, to improve South Africa's economy, to preserve democracy. However, they are big believers in having a government that is accountable, is efficient and competent and works towards achieving its goals. So one of the ways they want to do this is by making sure that the ministers' salaries are performance-based, so that a minister will not just get paid because they're the minister and because they're best buds with the president, but because they actually did their job and they did it well. They also have a big focus on small businesses and trying to increase the amount of small businesses and to make it easier for small businesses to function. Confusion comes in with the recent nomination of Mamphela Ramphele as the presidential candidate for the DA. And there is a technical team in place at the moment that is working to try and establish the means by which she could be the presidential candidate for the DA, but also still retain leadership of Gang. Basically what's happened is the DA have nominated her as their presidential candidate. She has accepted, however, the technicalities of it, so how the two parties are going to work together, those details haven't been officially sorted out, which means it's not a decision that is necessarily going to hold fast. I personally hope it does, because I feel that both Gang and the DA have a similar goal, and they also have a similar voting niche that they wish to gain, and I think by being two separate parties, they divide up that market, that corner of the vote that they have, and I feel that they'll be stronger together. Gang is one political party, the DA is another political party, and Mamphela Ramphele is the presidential candidate for the DA. It'll be interesting to see where Mamphela Ramphele decides to take Gang and how she decides to work with the DA in the future. In the year 2000, the DA, our next political party, became the DA, and they're basically an amalgamation of several political parties that had a shared vision. The DA's basic manifesto, and I'm summarizing everything, is again job creation, service delivery, big believer in the entrepreneur and the small business, but they also have a huge focus on accountability, similar to Gang, who we just discussed. The DA is headed by Helen Zille, and she is the current Premier of the Western Cape. One of the things that is interesting about the DA and how they have been operating recently is with the recent release of the matric results, the Western Cape was the only province to properly kind of check all the markers for the papers. So the DA made all their markers actually physically take the exams before they could be markers, which means that the Western Cape's NSC results were the most legitimate NSC results in the country. They do find themselves in quite a few controversies, and like I said, their presidential candidate is Mamphela Ramphele, which means some of what applies to them overlaps with what I've said about Gang. The ANC have often called the DA out on being a white liberal party. However, the DA are currently working very hard to change this perception. One of the biggest ways they've done this is by taking their former national spokesperson, Musi Mayamane, and making him the candidate for Premier of Gauteng. So that's going to be a very interesting election to watch, I feel. Politics is complicated, guys, okay? A lot of stuff happens. People change their minds because they're human freaking beings, and people change their minds. But basically, what happens is the ANC make a decision, the DA are like, what the frick? Like, what is going on? Why did you make the decision? It's not true. And then they argue against it, and then the and then the ANC argue back at the ANC, and they start saying like, well, you didn't do this, this, and this. And basically, people fight a lot in politics. Not everything goes according to plan. People change their minds a lot, which makes it so confusing to keep track of what's going on. From what I can gather, the DA's goals for the 2014 elections are to maintain the Western Cape, gain Gauteng, and have Mampela as their presidential candidate. Whether or not they'll succeed in becoming the leading political party of South Africa is up for debate, and most people would probably say that no, they won't, that 2019 is the year of the opposition. It's really hard. I don't know how the Vlogbrothers do it. They do their whole video like this. They speak like this the whole video, and they're like, Egypt, Egypt, fact, 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 and they speak like this, and I don't know how. Like, over my head.